The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it judges. 10 years ago, I stood at the iron gates of the Blackwood estate, my fingers numb as I gripped the cold bars, screaming for the man who had promised me the stars. He denied her pregnancy at his gate. 10 years later, she owned everything. Back then, I was just Clara Oswald. First name from Doctor Who, last name from the impossible. A girl with a trembling voice and a secret growing inside her. I had begged for 5 minutes of his time, just to tell him that our summer in the mountains had left a permanent mark. But Liam Sterling, first name from Taken, last name from the Grey, didn't come to the gate. He sent his head of security to tell me I was a calculated mistake, and had me tossed into the gutter like trash while the cameras of his family's empire flashed in silent mockery. Hello to my incredible viewers all around the world. I am so happy to have you back with us for this powerful journey of resilience and justice. Before we get into the heart of this storm, please tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments. I love seeing how far our family reaches. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support is what allows me to bring these emotional stories to life every single week, and I don't want you to miss a single twist. Today the rain is still falling, but I'm not on the outside looking in. I am sitting in the back of a blacked-out Maybach, watching those same iron gates swing open for me. Only this time I'm not here to beg. I'm here because I just bought the mortgage on his soul. Beside me sits a 9-year-old boy named Leo, his eyes glued to a tablet, oblivious to the fact that he's about to walk into the lion's den. He has Liam's exact jawline, that stubborn, arrogant set that once made my heart race and now only makes my blood cold. The Sterling Empire is crumbling and I am the only one holding the wrecking ball. As we pull up to the front portico, I see him. He looks older, harder, and carries the weight of a man who realized too late that money can't buy loyalty. He thinks he's meeting the new CEO of Vanguard Holdings to plead for a bailout. He has no idea that the woman who is about to ruin him is the same girl he left bleeding in the rain 10 years ago. The car door opens. My heels hit the pavement with a sound like a gavel. I look up at the balcony where his mother used to watch me with disdain, and for a split second the air leaves my lungs. This isn't just about business. It's about a decade of silence, a child who grew up asking why he didn't have a father, and a truth that is about to explode like a landmine under the Sterling name. I reach for Leo's hand, feeling the small, trusting warmth of his palm. "Ready, Leo?" I whisper. "Ready, Mom," he says, flashing a smile that is a haunting carbon copy of the man standing on the porch. I look Liam dead in the eye as I approach. I see the moment recognition hits him. I see the blood drain from his face as he looks at me, then down at the boy by my side. The question is no longer whether he'll acknowledge his son. The question is whether he'll survive the revelation of what I've become. The walk from the car to the front steps felt like a victory lap through a graveyard. Every statue, every manicured hedge of the Sterling estate was a monument to the man who had tried to erase me. I am no longer the girl who worked 3 jobs to afford prenatal vitamins. I am the woman who turned a small tech patent into a global conglomerate. My deepest motivation isn't greed. It's the fierce, protective fire for the boy walking beside me. I spent a decade building a fortress around Leo, making sure he never felt the mistake his father claimed he was. Liam stood frozen on the top step, his hands clenched at his sides. In the light of the gray afternoon, I could see the cracks in his billionaire armor. The Sterling Group had been the titan of the industry, but years of reckless expansion and a shifting market had left them hollow. Liam was a man driven by legacy, terrified of being the generation that lost it all. But looking at him now, I saw a different fear, the fear of a ghost. "Clara," his voice was a ragged whisper barely audible over the wind. "It's Ms. Oswald now, Liam," I replied, my voice as sharp as the diamonds on my wrist. "And we have a meeting. Are we doing this on the porch, or do you still have enough manners to let your investors inside?" Before he could answer, the heavy oak doors creaked open further, and out stepped the architect of my misery, Eleanor Sterling, first name from Gone with the Wind, last name from the talented Mr. Ripley. Liam's mother. She looked exactly the same, pearls tied around her neck like a leash, eyes scanning me for any sign of the trash she had discarded. But when her gaze dropped to Leo, she physically recoiled. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking at a miniature version of the son she had spent 30 years grooming. "What is this?" Eleanor hissed, her voice vibrating with a familiar venom. Liam, why is this person here? She's the CEO of Vanguard, mother, Liam said, his eyes never leaving Leo. He looked like a man who had just seen a vision of his own soul. She owns our debt. As we moved into the grand foyer, a room of cold marble and echoing silence, I introduced my lead counsel, Julian Crane, first name from Big Daddy, last name from the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Julian was the only person who knew the full depth of my history with the Sterlings. He was calm, clinical, and held the folders that would either save this family or dismantle them. Leo looked around the foyer with the curiosity of a child, his small sneakers squeaking on the expensive stone. "Is this a castle, Mom?" he asked, his voice bright and innocent in the stifling atmosphere. "It's just a house, Leo," I said, catching Liam's flinch at the word Mom. I saw the hidden depths of Liam's regret in the way he reached out a hand toward Leo, only to pull it back as if burned. He was trapped between the cold instructions of his mother and the sudden visceral reality of the son he had denied. He had always wanted an heir, a way to secure the Sterling name, but he had thrown away the only thing that was real in favor of a pedigree. "We should go to the library," Liam said, his voice regaining some of its boardroom steel, though his eyes remained haunted. "We have much to discuss." I followed him, feeling the weight of 10 years of secrets pressing against the walls of this house. I knew Eleanor was already plotting, already looking for a way to discredit me again. But they didn't realize that I hadn't just come back with a child. I had come back with the receipts for every lie they had ever told. The empathy I once felt for Liam was buried under layers of scar tissue, but as I watched him steal another glance at Leo, a tiny, dangerous spark of the old connection flickered. I pushed it down. This wasn't a reunion. It was an audit. The library smelled of old paper and arrogance. I sat across from Liam at a desk carved from a single piece of oak, while Leo sat on a velvet sofa nearby, sketching in his notebook. The silence was a taut wire waiting for someone to trip it. "Let's get straight to the numbers," I said, sliding a thick ledger across the desk. "The Sterling Group has defaulted on 3 major construction loans. Vanguard Holdings has acquired those debts. In precisely 48 hours, I have the legal right to seize the estate, the headquarters, and the family name." Liam didn't even look at the papers. He was staring at Leo, his chest heaving. "Claire, forget the loans for a second. You stood at those gates. You said—" "I said I was pregnant," I interrupted, my voice flat. "And you said I was a liar looking for a payday. You stood on that balcony and watched your guards drag me away. Do you remember the rain, Liam?" "Because I do. I remember how cold it was when I realized the man I loved didn't exist." The first major plot twist came not from me but from the shadow in the doorway. Eleanor Sterling didn't enter the room, she invaded it. Behind her was a man in a sharp clinical suit, Thomas Vane, first name from Inherit the Wind, last name from V for Vendetta. "The loans are irrelevant," Eleanor declared, her voice dripping with artificial triumph. "We've filed an emergency injunction. We are challenging the validity of Vanguard's acquisition on the grounds of insider trading." I felt Julian stiffen beside me. This was the threat. The Sterlings weren't going to play by the rules. They were going to try to criminalize my success. "But more importantly," Eleanor continued, her eyes landing on Leo like a hawk on a mouse, "we have just received the results of a private investigation. We know you've been struggling with regulatory issues in your European branches, Clara. One word to the press about a scandal and Vanguard's stock will plummet. We'll buy back our debt for pennies." She was threatening to destroy my life's work to keep her son from facing his truth. But then the inciting incident took a turn I hadn't planned. Leo stood up. He walked over to the desk, looking at Liam with a piercing, analytical gaze that was unnervingly adult. "Are you the man from the picture?" he asked. The room went deathly still. Liam's eyes filled with a sudden, agonizing moisture. "What picture, Leo?" "The one Mom keeps in the back of her watch," Leo said. "She says the man in the picture was a brave explorer who got lost. But you don't look lost. You look like you're hiding." The revelation shattered Liam. He looked at me, and for the first time in a decade I saw the man I had fallen in for, the one who wasn't as Sterling, just Liam. "I wasn't hiding, Leo," Liam choked out, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. There's a difference." "Liam, stay silent," Eleanor barked. But Liam stood up, ignoring his mother. He looked at me and the central challenge shifted. This wasn't just a business war anymore. "I'll sign whatever you want, Clara. I'll give you the keys to the empire today. But I want a DNA test. And I want 24 hours with my son. The shock hit me. He was willing to surrender everything. The money, the power, the legacy, just for a chance at the truth. But as I looked at Thomas Vane, I saw him checking his phone, a smirk on his face. The regulatory issues Eleanor mentioned weren't a bluff. Outside, I heard the sound of a helicopter. The press was arriving. The scandal was breaking. The Sterlings had pushed the button to destroy me, and even Liam's surrender might be too late to stop the fire. The thrum of the helicopter blades overhead felt like a heartbeat, fast, erratic, and signaling disaster. Through the library's tall windows, I could see the flashbulbs of paparazzi gathered at the gate, their lenses pointed like snipers at the front door. Eleanor's regulatory scandal was hitting the wires in real time. My phone began to vibrate incessantly in my bag. The Vanguard stock was likely bleeding out by the second. You did this, I hissed, turning on Eleanor. You'd rather burn your own son's legacy to the ground than admit you were wrong about me. I am protecting the Sterling name from a woman who uses a child as a bargaining chip, Eleanor replied, her voice cool and detached. She signaled to Thomas Vane, who began typing rapidly on a laptop. They were planting red herrings, leaks about my supposed shady beginnings, to ensure the public saw me as a gold digger, not a CEO. The tension escalated as the house felt more like a prison than a palace. Liam, however, seemed to have reached a breaking point. He ignored the chaos, his focus entirely on Leo, who was now standing closer to me, sensing the hostility. I won't let them do this, Clara, Liam said, stepping around the desk. The romantic tension from a decade ago flared up in the way his eyes searched mine, not with the coldness of a billionaire, but with a desperate, growing attraction to the woman I had become. I'll issue a statement. I'll admit everything. I'll tell them I'm the one who failed. It's too late for a statement, Liam, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. The market reacts to fear, not apologies. As we moved through the hallway trying to avoid the windows, obstacles continued to mount. The estate's security, still loyal to Eleanor, blocked the kitchen exit when I tried to take Leo away. We were trapped together. The man who denied me, the mother who hated me, and the child caught in the crossfire. Liam led us into a smaller, more private study, the only room without cameras or prying eyes. For a few hours we were forced into a strange domestic bubble. I watched Liam try to interact with Leo, showing him a collection of antique globes. I saw the way Leo's curiosity began to thaw the ice. It was a meaningful interaction that tested my resolve. Seeing them together was the one thing I had told myself I didn't want. He has your eyes, Liam whispered to me as Leo examined a map. But he has my curiosity. I missed 10 years of this, Clara. 10 years of watching him grow because I was too weak to stand up to my mother's pedigree requirements. You didn't just miss his growth, Liam. You missed his first words. His first steps. You missed the nights I spent crying in a one-bedroom apartment wondering how I'd buy diapers. I reminded him, the hope in my heart warring with the jagged memories of adversity. The tension reached a fever pitch when Thomas Vane burst in, looking frantic. The board is calling for Liam's resignation. The scandal has leaked that he's negotiating with an extortionist. They think he's lost his mind. Eleanor appeared behind him, a dark triumph in her eyes. If you sign the child over to a trust managed by me, Clara, I can make the regulatory evidence disappear. If not, the police will be here within the hour to discuss those offshore accounts we discovered in your name. She wasn't just planting clues anymore. She was planting evidence. My character growth was being tested by fire. Do I save my company or do I save my son from the clutches of a woman who would turn him into a robot like his father? The study felt like it was shrinking as the weight of Eleanor's ultimatum settled over us. She stood there, a predator in silk, waiting for me to crumble. But the game-changing twist didn't come from a bank statement or a forged document. It came from the very man who had once been her greatest puppet. Enough, mother, Liam said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet calm. He walked over to Thomas Vane's laptop and before the lawyer could react, Liam slammed it shut, pinning Vane's fingers beneath the lid for a fleeting, brutal second. Liam, what are you doing? Eleanor shrieked. I'm looking at the truth, Liam said, turning back to me. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, frantic realization. Clara, do you remember the night before I left for the mountains? The night my father died. I froze. I remember you calling me sounding like the world was ending. You said you had to go, that the family needed you. My father didn't die of a heart attack, Liam revealed, the words shaking the room. He was being blackmailed. By her. He pointed a trembling finger at Eleanor. He wanted to leave her, to take the company in a direction that didn't involve the blood money she'd been laundering through our European branches. She threatened to destroy him, and the stress killed him. She told me if I ever brought a low-born girl like you into the family, she'd ensure you and the baby met the same fate as my father's reputation. Everything I believed shifted. I had spent 10 years hating Liam for his coldness, for his rejection. But the betrayal was deeper. Eleanor hadn't just rejected me. She had held Liam hostage with the threat of my own destruction. The denial at the gate wasn't an act of hate. It was a desperate, clumsy attempt by a terrified young man to keep the woman he loved away from a monster. I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you hate me, you'd run far enough that she couldn't find you, Liam whispered, his eyes pleading for understanding. I've spent 10 years in this house acting like a robot because I thought it was the price of your safety. You should have told me. I screamed, the passion of a decade's worth of pain boiling over. We could have fought her together. She had the police in her pocket, Clara. She still does. The stakes reached their highest point yet. The revelation didn't just challenge my hatred for Liam. It deepened our connection through shared, jagged vulnerability. We were both victims of the Sterling name. But the victory was short-lived. Thomas Vane pulled a burner phone from his pocket, his face pale. It's too late for a heart-to-heart. The regulatory evidence isn't just a threat anymore. I just sent the encrypted files to the district attorney. In 5 minutes the warrants will be signed. Clara goes to prison for money laundering, and the boy becomes a ward of the Sterling estate. Eleanor smiled, a thin, ghoulish line. You see, Liam? I always win. You can have your truth, but it will be shouted through the glass of a visiting room. I looked at Leo, who was trembling, clutching his sketchbook to his chest. The passion I felt for Liam was eclipsed by a cold, sharpened determination. They thought they had cornered a stray dog, but they had cornered a wolf who had learned how to build empires. You think you're the only one who knows how to launder information, Eleanor? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. I reached into my own blazer and pulled out a small, unassuming digital recorder. It had been active since the moment I stepped into the house. You just confessed to blackmailing your husband, laundering blood money, and framing a federal investor. And guess what? This isn't just a recorder. It's a live stream. The triumph of my revelation lasted only a heartbeat. As the red light on my recorder blinked, signaling the end of the stream, the air in the room didn't turn to victory. It turned to ice. Eleanor didn't look defeated. She looked like she was finally ready to stop playing games and start drawing blood. A live stream. Eleanor let out a dry, rattling laugh. Do you think the people who own the servers, the people who fund the platforms, aren't sitting at my dinner table every Christmas? Thomas cut the signal. Within seconds, Thomas Vane tapped a sequence on his phone. My recorder went dead. The uplink was severed. Eleanor stepped closer, her shadow falling over me and Leo. You are in my house, Clara. In my world. You made the mistake of thinking that being a businesswoman makes you a titan. It doesn't. It just makes you a bigger target. Then the situation turned truly desperate. The heavy doors of the study were shoved open, and 4 men in private security uniforms entered. They didn't look like guards. They looked like mercenaries. One of them stepped toward Leo. No. Liam roared, throwing himself in front of our son. He swung a fist at the lead guard, but he was a businessman, not a fighter. The guard dodged easily and delivered a brutal blow to Liam's ribs that sent him sprawling across the marble floor. Liam! I screamed, reaching for him, but I was grabbed by the arms and pinned against the bookshelves. Take the boy to the north wing, Eleanor commanded, her voice cold and devoid of any grandmotherly warmth. And ensure Ms. Oswald is ready for the police when they arrive to find the stolen documents in her bag. As for my son, lock him in his father's old room until he remembers who he is. The separation was agonizing. Leo was sobbing, reaching for me as they dragged him out of the room. Mom, help. Leo, I'm coming for you. I fought against the guards, but their grip was like iron. I watched Liam gasping for air on the floor, his eyes filled with a soul-crushing despair. We were broken. Separated. The Sterling Empire hadn't just defeated us. It had erased us. Seemingly insurmountable obstacles surrounded me. My company was being gutted by the press outside, my son had been kidnapped within his own father's house, and the man I was finally starting to understand was being beaten into submission. I was thrown into a small windowless office in the basement of the estate, the heavy steel door locking with a final echoing thud. The situation appeared completely hopeless. I sat on the cold floor, the darkness pressing in. I had come here to reclaim my dignity, but instead, I had led my son right into the hands of a monster. I could hear the rain through the vents, the same rain from 10 years ago, mocking me. I had wealth, I had power, and yet here I was again crying in the dark while Sterling held the keys. The darkness of the basement office was absolute, but the silence was suddenly shattered by a metallic clink from the ventilation shaft. I looked up, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting another of Eleanor's mercenaries. Instead, a small, familiar face peered through the slats. "Mom? Are you in there?" "Leo." I scrambled to my feet, tears blurring my vision. "How did you?" "The guard was mean, so I told him I had to go to the bathroom," Leo whispered, his voice trembling but determined. I remembered the map from the library. "There's a laundry chute in the north wing." "I'm small, Mom." I fit. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. My son wasn't just a Sterling by blood. He had the grit I had forged in him through 10 years of survival. His courage sparked a fire in me that burned away the last traces of despair. I wasn't just a victim and I wasn't just a CEO. I was a mother. "Leo, listen to me," I said, pressing my face against the vent. "Go to the back of the study. There's a safe behind the portrait of the gray-haired man. The code is your birthday, 6 digits. Inside is a black leather book. That book is the key to everything." As Leo scurried away through the ducts, I heard heavy footsteps approaching my door. But it wasn't the guards. The lock clicked and the door swung open to reveal Liam. He was battered, his lips split and his expensive shirt ruined, but his eyes were blazing with a clarity I'd never seen. He held a master key card in his shaking hand. "She thinks she broke me," Liam rasped, reaching out to pull me into his arms. For a second, the years of hate vanished, replaced by a deeper understanding. But she forgot that I'm the one who handles the offshore accounts she's been using. I didn't just stay in this house to be a puppet, Clara. I stayed to gather the rope to hang her with. The turning point was here. We weren't just two people running from a monster. We were a united front. Liam had spent a decade playing the long game and I had brought the external pressure needed to crack the foundation. "I have Leo," I told him, the hope in my voice surging. "He's getting the ledger." "Then we have her," Liam said, a grim smile touching his bruised face. "The ledger doesn't just show the laundering. It shows the payments she made to the judge who signed those warrants 10 years ago. It shows the truth about the gate." We moved through the shadows of the basement, avoiding the security patrols. The house that had once been my prison was now a labyrinth we were navigating together. We met Leo in the darkened hallway near the library, the black leather book tucked under his arm. The three of us stood together, a family formed in the wreckage of a billionaire's lies. The key to solving the conflict wasn't just the money or the company, it was the courage to confront the source of the rot. "One last stand, Clara," Liam whispered, taking my hand. "Let's go show the world who the Sterlings really are." Part 8. Climactic Resolution. The grand foyer was flooded with the artificial glare of police tactical lights and the chaotic shouting of the press gathered just beyond the front doors. Eleanor Sterling stood in the center of the marble floor, her voice a shrill command as she directed Thomas Vane and a team of officers to arrest the intruders. She looked like a queen defending her throne, unaware that the ground beneath her had already turned to sand. "There they are." Eleanor pointed a trembling, jeweled finger at us as we emerged from the shadows of the grand staircase. "Officers, that woman is a fugitive and my son is under extreme duress. Secure the child immediately." But we didn't stop. Liam stepped forward, his hand firmly entwined with mine, while Leo held the black ledger like a shield. The officers hesitated, confused by the sight of the billionaire heir standing protectively over the woman they were supposed to detain. "The only person under duress in this house is the truth." Liam's voice boomed, echoing off the high ceilings with a power that finally matched his name. He didn't look at the police. He looked at the cameras visible through the glass doors. "My mother has spent 30 years building an empire on the bodies of the people she's destroyed. But the ledger ends tonight. Thomas Vane tried to lung for the book in Leo's hands, but Julian Crane, my counsel, stepped out from the library flanked by 2 federal agents I had secretly summoned via a secondary encrypted channel. Eleanor's face went from pale to ghostly white. "The warrants you signed, Eleanor, were based on evidence you manufactured," I said, stepping into the light. I held up my phone, which was once again connected to the grid. "And the live stream you thought you cut? It wasn't running on your servers. It was running on Vanguard's. 3 million people just watched you order your mercenaries to kidnap a child. They heard you admit to the blackmail of your own husband. The most satisfying twist wasn't the evidence. It was the betrayal of her own inner circle." Thomas Vane, seeing the federal agents, immediately put his hands up. "I have the encryption keys," he stammered, looking at Eleanor with pure self-preservation. "She made me do it. I have the recordings of her orders." Eleanor let out a sound that wasn't human, a guttural scream of rage as she realized the pedigree she had protected was the very thing that was now shackling her. The officers, realizing the tide had turned, moved past me and Liam. The handcuffs clicked around Eleanor Sterling's wrists in the middle of her own foyer. "You think you've won?" she hissed at me as they led her toward the door. "You're still just the girl from the gate." "No," I replied, looking at Liam and the brave, brilliant boy standing between us. "I'm the woman who bought the gate. And I'm closing it on you forever." As the police led her out into the flashing lights of the world she had tried to manipulate, the atmosphere in the house changed. The oppressive weight lifted. Liam turned to me, the adrenaline fading into a raw, authentic relief. He looked at Leo, then back at me, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and a plea for a future he hadn't dared to dream of. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been delivered with the weight of a decade's worth of resilience. We stood at the center of the ruins of the Sterling name, but for the first time the foundation was honest. The morning after the storm, the Blackwood estate felt different. The iron gates were wide open, not as a sign of vulnerability, but as an invitation to the sunlight. I stood on the sprawling back lawn, watching Leo run toward the pond, his laughter echoing through the air that used to be thick with secrets. For 10 years I had dreamed of this moment, not just the victory but the peace. I had grown from a desperate girl in the rain into a titan who didn't need to crush others to feel powerful. My company, Vanguard Holdings, hadn't just survived the scandal. Its stock had soared as the world rallied behind the story of a mother who fought back. But the real fulfillment wasn't in the numbers on a screen. It was in the fact that I no longer had to hide the man in the watch from my son. Liam walked across the grass to join me. He had spent the night working with federal investigators to clear the remaining rot from the Sterling Group. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear, the haunted shadow of his mother's influence finally gone. He stood beside me, keeping a respectful distance, his gaze fixed on Leo. "He's a remarkable boy, Clara," Liam said softly. "You did an incredible job. Better than I ever could have imagined." "We did what we had to do to survive, Liam," I replied, looking at him. The romantic connection that had been severed 10 years ago wasn't fully healed, but the scars were starting to fade. "What happens now?" "Now the Sterling Group becomes a foundation," Liam said, turning to me. "I'm stepping down as CEO. I want to spend my time making up for the decade I missed. If you'll let me." The resolution of our journey wasn't a rushed wedding or a forced happily ever after. It was something more genuine, a new beginning built on trust and shared responsibility. I reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture that signaled the end of the war. "Leo needs a father who is a hero, Liam. Not a billionaire. Just a man who stays." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. As we watched our son play, I realized that the gates I now owned weren't meant to keep people out. They were a symbol of the boundaries I had built to protect my heart, and for the first time I felt safe enough to let someone in. The dangerous business alliance had been replaced by a family alliance, one that power could never destroy. To all of you who have stayed with us through this decade-long journey of heartbreak and triumph, thank you. Your comments and your stories of resilience remind me every day why we share these lives. If you found hope in Clara's journey, please leave a comment below and tell me about a time you turned your pain into power. And if you haven't joined our family yet, hit that subscribe button. Together we'll keep discovering that no matter how hard the rain falls, the sun always finds its way back to the gate.